It's been a while, but we're back with a new season of Everybody Hates Your Brand. It's been too long since the last episode of Everybody Hates Your Brand, for which I humbly apologise, especially if you were a regular listener, but we're back with Season 6, and we start with an interview episode. We'll be talking to Tom Phillips. Tom has spent over 20 years working in some of the UK's best marketing agencies with a focus on the realms of loyalty, CRM and digital, so a man after my own heart. He's worked on brands like BP, Virgin, Costa Coffee, Nespresso and Halfords, and a bunch of other amazing brands. So let's kick off Season 6 with a bang, shall we? Welcome to the podcast, Tom.
Hi, Rob. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Great to be here. Great to be here today.
That's the first. You're the first one who's made that joke. So after episode 50 something or other, so well done. I like it. Well, thank you again for spending the time today. As you know, we do a section up front where we do what I call the credibility section. It's just we have people who listen across the US and Australia and different territories. So can you just give us a quick introduction to yourself and your career and those kind of things, so people know who you are and why your opinions matter?
Sure. I've spent the last 20 odd years working in integrated marketing agencies as a data-driven and customer marketing strategist, predominantly in the UK and Europe. I've recently left a role as a strategy leader in a network agency, and I'm enjoying the freedom of exploring new projects in areas I've previously been in, so client-side roles, all of which are leveraging my data-driven digital and experience. And although I spent my career in sort of CRM and customer-driven marketing, amongst many things, I've actually had the privilege to be involved in the design, development and running of some of the biggest and best-known loyalty programs out there. Unlike marketing campaigns, one of the great things about developing loyalty programs is that the good ones, at least, stand the test of time. And even decades later, although they hopefully have been evolved, they can still be pointed to. And I was thinking back to when I really first started. I was involved in the pitch of Nectar at the UK Coalition Scheme back in 2002. And actually, Nectar's been one of those brands and loyalty programs that's sort of flowed throughout my career. And since then, I've worked on and at least a couple of dozen hotel, airline and retail programs, including Premier Inn, Virgin, Hotel Chocolat, and Home actually taking them out of their spend and save program into Nectar. Ironically, at the time, we were sat around the Green Shield boardroom table. We know that because it had the little plaque on it saying this is where they developed the stamp collect and get program, probably the first ever loyalty program. It felt.
I love the fact they put a plaque. It's all very kind of like the blue plaques you see in London on houses. I like it.
Exactly like that. But I mean, I think when I look at some of the really big ones, I've created the strategic and operational framework for Nespresso's global club called And You, which has been in existence now for coming up to 10 years with the benefits and rewards that can be unified and flexed across every market they operate in. And most recently, I helped Halfords conceive and design their motoring club, helping them shift from a kind of a retailer with a very infrequent, low-value, distressed purchasing customer to a motoring service business. With a high frequency reoccurring revenue from paying subscribed members. And that really fundamentally changed the way that they looked at loyalty in their business.
Gotcha. Well, that's a very storied, I won't say long because it'll make us both feel old, history and career. And I think what's interesting is, working in that kind of data-driven field and data-driven marketing, that the key word there is data and tech. And it seems to me that there's been one issue that's been around for as long as sort of CRM has been around, which is the amount of brands who buy marketing tech and then don't get the most out of it. I'm sure you've heard that thing, we bought a Ferrari, but we don't know how to drive it, or whatever whatever automotive metaphor you want to come up with. And if you look at Salesforce released an interesting state of the marketing report, that 68% of respondents are described as not completely satisfied with their marketing investments, and only sort of 1 in 3 are satisfied with how they use data. And that's something that I see a lot in my job. I'm sure you've seen it a lot over your career. So let's just solve that in the next 5 minutes. How hard could it be? What do you think are the root causes of that situation? Is it data? Is it legacy systems? Is it cultural silos? And then what do you see as the way to avoid that situation in the first place? And if you are stuck in that mire, how on earth do you get out of it? So just a small a few questions to begin with.
Sure. Yeah, let's unpack it. Well, it's interesting. It's, again, reflecting on it, and I'm going to age myself here. Demographically, I sit on that cusp of what millennials and Gen X generations.
Yeah.
I've heard of us being referred to, and I think you may fall into this camp as well, Rob, as Xennials.
I'm Gen X. I'm a geriatric Gen X. Young Gen X is what I am.
Yeah, well, exactly. I likewise. But I think we were a group of kids that had both analog and digital childhoods, essentially. And we didn't get things like emails, computers, or mobiles until we were probably in our late teens. But we entered the workforce as the generation who were creating the buzz around digital and mobile first business. And on reflection, the first dot-com boom, for those of us who don't experience the later one, an explosion into digital and data marketing really was like the Wild West, prospecting for the new oil, as Clive Humby, the godfather of loyalty and Tesco's Club Card, called it.
Indeed.
And we kind of rode that hype wave of data harvesting across the websites that promised all sorts until it all imploded and we sort of had to grow up. But what it means is I've worked at a time where businesses have been in constant development of their data and technology capabilities. And we've done that, as I say, that full hype curve from the peak of inflated expectations to the trough of disillusionment and the hard graft reality of finding demonstrable value cases, sustainable business, data relationships built around proper data privacy and protection. And technology has transformed from sort of server stack and code-based hardware to cloud-based and AI-enabled systems that we live in today. And I think in lots of ways it's absolutely magic. But of course, magic is, a series of hard graft and real cleverness built behind it.
Yeah.
But for those of us who were there at the start, it also feels like we've pretty much got to where we hoped we would. Infinite amounts of data, unlimited storage, tracking every action, and increasingly, importantly, non-actions. The gaps in between, unlimited processing power and instantaneous decisioning really is powering those truly personalised experiences. Yet it doesn't really surprise me that marketers aren't satisfied or feeling that they're struggling to realise the potential of their investments across a kind of increasingly more fragmented and complex customer journey and a media environment. And I've been overwhelmed by the amount of data they have because it's really hard to bring it together. And actually, it's getting insight out of it that is genuinely challenging.
Yeah, agreed.
And I think this probably comes down to a few things. One, a need to really shore up the foundations of their data and technology ecosystems. Disconnected data points, the third-party deprecation, more touch points, more data in these kind of walled gardens of Amazon and Apple and Google, and that sort of seamless commerce, meaning that people can buy everywhere and anywhere now. And despite having more data than ever, unifying it continues to remain a challenge. And more than 2/3 of businesses say they haven't really cracked the issues of siloed data and increasing identity resolution, which means bringing it together so that you can act on it.
Yeah.
So I think you've got that there. You've got more demands across the business for the customer and marketing data, which is a great thing. But we've evolved from a place where data was used predominantly for just measurement or outbound sales promotion to one where customer data is being used to deliver highly personalized and highly timely product and service experiences. And I see this as being kind of like CRM as a service. It's not just a communication, but actually it becomes part of the experience. And this is really putting greater demands and expectations on the systems, data, quality, and the services the business has. Again, leading to this thing that says, well, are we really getting the value out of it? Are we really unlocking it? Are we doing what we want to do?
Yeah.
And underpinning all that, I guess, is, if that's the technology and data pieces and the expectations, you've then got the capabilities, stretched resources, and more data requires new skills, new approaches to analytics and new strategies. First-party data, perhaps once the preserve of the tech team or the CRM manager, is now actually the crown jewel of almost all businesses. Yet many still don't have a clear sort of board-level owner or of the customer or data. And CMOs are increasingly being turned into sort of chief operating officers, focusing on sort of short-term, focused on these sort of short-term sales levers, while businesses often made good technology investments. They are struggling with the data leadership gaps across the silos of their organisation.
I think that point you made about retail's an especially bad one for that short term. Like I remember retailers I've worked at, you're stuck in this weekly sales cycle, and to try and lift your head up and see past that and see the wood for the trees is phenomenally difficult. So I think that's a really interesting point on that short term sales lever for sure.
It's a real balance. I mean, you speak to marketers, and they know the value and understand the value of brand, but the ability to make long-term investments that are going to manifest in months, years' time, It just not against the short-term sales drive and focus of a commercial director saying, "I need sales yesterday." It's a real challenge.
Yeah, and the CFO's pounding the table for missing revenue numbers week on week. It's a difficult challenge. And so you talked about those kind of three elements. Building on that, if those are the issues, how do you avoid them or build on them or move past them?
Sure. Well, if we believe that one of the biggest challenges for businesses today is collecting and extracting value from their first-party data, I still think that is an issue for a lot of businesses. That we need to build our data strategies around customers, to create something compelling, valuable, and ultimately easy for them to understand and for them to recognise why they may share their data with you. Tesco's Club Card was arguably one of the first loyalty programs that put data at the forefront of the value exchange. Yes, the airlines have been around for a while, but they were really focused on points for driving additional sales. This was very much about saying, well, we really see value in the data here to understand more about our customers, to allow us to actually not just sell them more, but to expand what they use Tesco's for. So the points were a means to an end. But today, data is ubiquitous across the customer journey, and loyalty programs are no longer required to capture the customer relationship or data in order to power revenue-focused activities such as digital communications program promotions or omnichannel commerce. And loyalty programs can there change their focus and mechanics from sort of data harvesting to I think experience enhancing. Businesses can also look at that data value exchanges they have with their customers and how they collect and use that data. And I think there's four things worth focusing on back to trying to solve those issues. One, break down data silos, data quality, real focus on data quality, completeness and correctness, and data accessibility matter inside the organization. Some of this is a technology problem or solution, but most of this is a culture and experience, helping people think about data applications and feeling confident in creating them. Preferences, promotional responsiveness, and attitudes are critical when you want to understand your customers, whether you're an airline, a food box subscription, or a luxury beauty brand. Understanding what people want and how they think about you. Collecting the right data. Your customers are your lifeblood. Their data is unique, and it gives you actually kind of almost a fingerprint or blueprint to that only you have. And that is unique to your organization. Creating the right data value exchanges, overcoming those data privacy concerns, means that customers not only trust you, but see that mutual value in a data relationship. I think we also need to create something special, something that enhances your product, something of a service or experience that again is unique to your brand, that it delights and excites in a way only you can. I've always believed that if you focus on your customers' needs, you will always end up creating something valuable. And then underpinning all of this is data leadership. Essentially, you need to be both a customer-centric and data-centric organization. And your sort of chief data officer or chief customer officers should be sat at a board level alongside your operating officers and CEOs. And indeed, this really should be the domain of CMOs, looking beyond brand and performance communications. But there's so much been asked of CMOs. You see, some of the more successful organisations are creating those digital customer and data roles outside of it.
Yeah, and that cultural element of using data and how to use data and when to use data to build experiences, I think is I think a lot of people are getting better at the direct marketing, old-fashioned term, but the direct marketing side of it, the marketing piece, if you like. But that building experiences, I think, is really an interesting perspective and where a lot of brands are moving to. And I think your point about silos, the biggest handicap for a lot of them is legacy systems. You go and work at a brand that's been around for a long time and they've still got a ticketing system that's built on like an IBM mainframe somewhere. It's really hard to do anything with. And I think what you've given there is some interesting perspectives on a way to build the case to invest to improve that, which is saying we can just do better emails, for example, is not a great case. Saying we can build a personalized customer experience and a customer service if we invest in this, and that's going to give us X, Y, and Z, I think is a much more compelling argument to start breaking down legacy systems and investing in what needs to happen, I think. So that's a really interesting point. And we talk about technology and movement. You can't swing a stick without hitting the phrase AI these days. And I think it's interesting for people who've worked in CRM for a long time. AI has been around for a long time in the form of predictive AI. And I think obviously that's improving. But the thing that's really kind of thrown a cat amongst pigeons, obviously, is generative AI, certainly in the last 4 or 5 years. So again, referring back to that Salesforce report, marketers rank AI as both the number one priority and challenge. It's one of those things they know they need to do something about it, but they're not entirely sure what yet. And there's some interesting research about, do customers trust AI and that kind of content, that kind of technology. So what's your perspective on the roles of sort of AI within CRM marketing, and what are you saying to your clients about it? And then this is something that's been pinging around my head a little bit, which is, if we start using AI, do you think we lose sight of the fact that there are humans at the end of our communications or our experience, that the fixation on technology dehumanizes people a bit too much, and we don't think about the why people are making choices, and that we're talking to human beings? So that's a fun two-parter for you to unravel.
Okay, that's a good one to grapple with, isn't it? I think you might even just start with the last bit first, if that makes sense. I think one of the things is this thinking that increasingly it ties onto the technology piece, which is businesses need to think more about ecosystems, and they're not only the ecosystems in terms of systematic technology and data, but ecosystems in terms of customers, communities, and the way that their brands work and partner systems. And I think ecosystem thinking, even just as a piece of language, changes the way that you think about how you operate, where you operate, and why in the communities that they work. I think a lot of that, then the way you start to get that is design thinking. Design thinking inherently puts customers into the heart of everything. So if you start with design thinking, you start to go, I understand my customers, their needs, break down those into ways that you can then identify a problem that you can then solve from which then the business answer. So I think design thinking allows you to be humanistic, because inherently you put people at the heart of it. And if you think about ecosystems thinking, that will also allow you to then turn that into systematic ways a business can act, and therefore the role of technology and AI can solve. Because I don't think people expect things to be always come from a person. They'll understand that it's coming from a business, but I think that that you need to find the way to connect with them. And I think, like you said, AI's would age myself again. I think it's really interesting when you start seeing the same things coming around again. If I started my career in the wild west of data, then here we are 20 odd years later in the dawn of AI, again another phase of massive upheaval and change in the way digital marketing started. And I think we're seeing some really interesting applications of AI powering things like personalization, more contextual, more relevant engagement. I think, as I said, we'll continue to see CRM as a service or product evolve with increasing ways to blend the way you discover, you buy, use, and share your brand and products across channels. And maybe this kind of movement from sort of omni-channel to omni-channel marketing, the use of AI agents to seamlessly manage your search queries into sort of personalized digital journeys and service will be where we see these. I think that we see the big steps in the next 12 to 18 months. And then I think we'll continue to see sort of services and experience innovations that come from curating communities and understanding their needs and nuances. And I always remember coming up with an idea for a garden centre to support gardeners based on their garden soil type, or the weather in their garden, the orientation, whether they're north-facing or south-facing garden, the experience they had as an individual, and the preferences and even successes of their neighbours, and how you could use that kind of data to really drive a level of personalisation that supported them in their journey to have a better garden or to enjoy their gardening a bit more. And I think you take that kind of creative thought or ambition and say, actually, these days with AI and Gen AI, absolutely can create that kind of content and that kind of experience for people.
Yeah, I think the interesting point you made there was that we made lots of interesting points, but the one that stuck in my brain is the idea that you're not in the business of selling plants. You're in the business of helping a gardener create the garden of their dreams or the garden that they want. And I think that's a very, talking about that, referring back to that kind of cultural thing about revenue. That we're not here to sell plants. We're here to help gardeners create something. And then as a proxy for that, as a byproduct for that, builds trust, helps people, they come back to you, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's a really good way of thinking about it for a lot of people.
That's what design thinking will get you to do. You'll end up going, what is it that somebody wants? The plants are the enabler, what they want is
Yes.
love. You can't. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
What is it they want? They want 5 minutes to themselves after dropping the kids off to, refresh and reframe for their day. A coffee is the way they're going to do that.
Yeah.
Right. So
Absolutely.
Starbucks now creates that third space. It's a very customer centric way of doing it, and it allows you to be human. But once you can do that, you can then use the technology, the AI, to actually deliver it. So I think we were stuck in this thing about saying, can AI be human enough? I think if we just still design our experiences and our brands and our what we believe in, with the human at mind, the tools we have then can only enhance and create the wonderful, even more wonderful personalized experiences that people have. And I think the critical part of this journey is we have to bring consumers. Again, it's the same we've done with the last 20 years in data and digital, from whether social or e-commerce. We have to bring customers along. They will. The customers are adopting it. They are already using AI in lots of ways, but they are also reasonably and probably rightly cautious of something they don't understand, that they can't control, or feels like it will take advantage of them. So we have to build trust. We have to build trust, which is back to brands again.
Yes, agreed. I think that there'll be with any like new technology, it takes a long time for it. The old adoption curve. You'll have some people who are racing ahead using AI, really keen to interact with it, and some people who are like, "Hang on a minute, I'm not sure about that." And how do you manage both those different groups of customers? I think that point about getting people to come back and loyalty is always an interesting space. We've touched on it already, and I think there's a ton of. I've been lucky enough to interview professors of loyalty and people who run loyalty programs and all that kind of stuff, and I run a couple myself. And there is enough evidence out there that show that quote unquote loyalty programs work, in that they drive transactional loyalty. They get people to come back and use you again. But I hear a lot from clients around, well, transactional loyalty, it almost feels like I'm bribing them in a way. There's a shallowness to that relationship. Do you think that it is possible that brands should be trying for more than that, a stronger emotional connection? Or is that, if you ever read Bob Hoffman's Ad Contrarian column, is that just marketing guff and a complete myth? People don't want relationship with brands. That's crazy. Where do you kind of stand on that?
I probably stand on both sides of the fence probably at the same time.
Yes.
It depends who's asking is normally the answer, Rob. But I think let's really try and boil it down. I view loyalty as two things, often linked together. I think you've got hard loyalty, which is the mechanics and benefits of a program, and you got sort of this softer loyalty, which is the emotional connection that people have with a brand or a business. And I think people can have a connection. Well, I mean, it may not be the same way they have with their children or their loved ones, but I think we as marketers love to take language like relationship and repurpose it for our own meaning. But either way, loyalty is about behavior, and in business, it's about the intentional, systematic design of the compelling reasons for those who you care about to choose you at every opportunity. And it's a part of that is brand building, which is and building trust. And a platform for both short and long-term value. But it's also about increasing spend and margin through price premium, frequency, and ultimately tenure, get lifetime value. So that's from a business perspective. As you know, Rob, I tend to think about loyalty strategy holistically, and then sort of loyalty programs as that kind of customer-facing proposition or entity that can be pointed at or touched at in some format. So I mentioned a couple that I've talked about, but reality is every business should have strategies that seek to retain customers. Not every business will need or benefit from a fixed benefits proposition. But I think there's this thing that says, design correctly and managed properly. There's plenty of evidence that loyalty programs can drive incremental benefit. Amazon Prime members spend 4 times more than non-members. 80% of Sephora's programs come through its Beauty Insiders programs. Customers are willing to have these kind of relationships with you if they see a real value in that. How do they do that? Well, I think there's when on the business side, when you look at how a loyalty program works for a business, about 50% of the benefit used to be was a rule of thumb. 50% of the benefit would come from the mechanics, so collecting points, redeeming benefits, all encouraging spend, and a further 50% would come through sort of the CRM element attached to the side, so the promoting products that people wouldn't have previously purchased otherwise. But the thing is, under all of this is that true loyalty is earned, not bought. You can't buy somebody's loyalty. That people stay with the people and brands because they have that kind of slightly deeper emotional connection, not necessarily just a transactional one, a preference, a desire, a trust that is built over time that if I do this, you'll do that. And it's brand building, so it builds that kind of deep memory tissue that through, not just through logos and colors and visual designs, but also all the touch points, and that every time, you have an issue, whether it's or an experience, there's that we build a stronger, deeper relationship.
Yeah.
And good, is this really an emotional connection? Well, I think that it is. According to Daniel Kuhneman, 98% of people's choices use that kind of system one thinking. It's fast, it's deep, ingrained, responsive thinking that allows people to make a choice quickly. And good brand building and product service experience design builds both that mental and physical availability. And you can get a long way to creating this, But when people sort of enter that system two thinking, the emotional connection is less likely to stand that kind of test of loyalty, unless you've created the anchor points around the relationship. Recognizing genuine tenure or building genuine loss into the program. Then you're in a world of rational thinking where people come down to products or benefits or prices.
Yeah.
I spent quite a bit of time with Nespresso actually discussing the needs for them to be a loyalty brand, not just a brand with a loyalty program. This idea that that it was ultimately an emotional product. As a direct customer business, they needed the loyalty program to span the entire customer journey, from how they bought machines and capsules on day one, when you were most opening, starting that relationship, to the experience you had in store, to the access you had of the benefits and the recognition you earned over time. That stopped you ultimately switching to cheaper supermarket capsules, which was their loyalty problem. How do we keep people, who in buying capsules? And while you could expedite yourself through the purchase to the top tier of the program, the only way really to get there was actually to be loyal. And it took up to 10 years to get there to be the top tier. Now, people at the beginning, that's not motivating. It's like, am I going to wait 10 years to get here? No. But once you're there, believe me, it does stop people leaving. So its ability to create this kind of fear of loss is massively powerful. Again, that's emotional. The fear of loss is a very emotional feeling.
100%. 100%. So, I had a friend, on that status, airlines, I think, play into that. They do it on in some cases on a yearly cycle. You've lost your benefit. I've told this story a few times, but I had a friend when I was living in Australia who was on the Qantas Club. He was gold level, which I think gives you access to the lounges and all that kind of stuff. He took a flight. This is terrible for his carbon footprint, but he took a flight from Sydney to Melbourne and back again, just so that he could retain his status for next year. So I think tying into the point that you were making and about the fact that brand building a brand is emotional, and that the experience that you can create for somebody can tie into that emotional context, I think is undeniable for some brands.
So and I think that's an interesting point, because you've got transactions going on there. So you've got people rationally saying, "Well, I want to retain benefits." That's a rational thing, and I think you need that there. That's for the bit when people start to say, "Well, why would I?" Is there real value from this? And they engage the system two thinking, but for most of the time, at system one, it's just becomes a habit. I go into Tesco's and why? I still use prices. Why would I not have the loyalty program in order to get that price benefit? Rationally it makes sense, but even just emotionally, it's like I would be a mug not to be it, and you just it
becomes habitual.
Your way around it. It's habitual.
Absolutely. I think what's interesting then is this idea of mechanics, loyalty program mechanics. You touched on it a little bit, and how I think loyalty mechanics you separated them out, and I think that's right. But I also think the type of mechanic you choose can impact the kind of emotional side of the conversation in some way. So we talked about loss aversion, and the idea of like Amazon Prime is a loyalty program. And the reason, to your point, about 4 times more likely to come, start at Amazon, is that I've bloody paid for this thing. I want to make sure I'm getting something out of it. Is a part, not all the whole equation, but is part of what makes Amazon Prime powerful. And you can see the same with the Rafa Cycling Club. I thought of outdoor exercise horrifies me, but the idea of people who are going out there in the colours of Rafa and proudly showing that, and that's a paid for program. You've then also got the idea of blockchain, which had gone quiet a little bit behind the scenes after 4 or 5 years ago, but Hugo Boss built a program based on blockchain. Now, is it exploiting it at the moment? No, probably not. But I think there's an interesting world where people are trading benefits that they've earned and things like that across blockchain, which I think is a really interesting kind of space. So, putting on your clairvoyant outfit, where do you see? I don't know what that is, the clairvoyant outfit, but regardless, where do you see loyalty programs evolving to? Do you reckon over the next? Well, let's use 5 years.
Okay, here's the crystal ball moment, or looking into the tea leaves.
Indeed.
Well, we're definitely at an interesting point in the economic cycle, and with properly disruptive technology that is accessible tools. I think it's a really exciting time. I always think it's interesting when you look at advertising as both and marketing as both a driver and a litmus for culture and where we're going to go. But the pandemic was obviously a massive accelerator of digital first business and e-commerce, and elements that have found themselves being increasingly built into refreshed loyalty schemes that we see seeking to drive and retain those behaviours. So free delivery, referral discounts, gamification, subscription models, things we've sort of seen in loyalty programs over the last few years. The last 24 months has been dominated in retail, at least, by this idea of membership and member pricing. And I think that's very point really sits there. This kind of cost of living crisis being paramount, and it's moving towards instant and much more tangible value. I think membership actually and connection has some road to run yet. There are plenty of brands that could develop their loyalty strategies to develop more unique offerings aligned to their brand and collective needs of their customers. I think we should look at this sort of social first brand building, and I think loyalty can support that more. I think we will see this continue looking beyond physical gestures of belonging to create these kind of tangible benefits of connections that enrich customers' lives and experiences through that kind of collective power, collective data. AI is, of course, collective data. So, this idea is, that you're a member, not a customer, you're in control, the relationship is equal, I think built around your needs, so supporting you in your core needs and building confidence. We talked about the gardening as an example. It evolves as you do, so it can be much more flexible perhaps than they have been. Lifetime brand building, making you feel valued. I think we can look at this kind of much more with technology and AI anticipating change. So it represents you, but also can anticipate you much better than it has done, and make you feel part of something. So I think this membership is rather than just people call things like Costa Coffee Club, but is it really a club? Is it just actually been a transactional program? And I think we can this be powered through omnichannel recognition, spontaneous moments of appreciation, enhanced utility. So programs that are creating utility for you, not just taking your data, and contextually rich communication. But I think, as you talked about blockchain, it was interesting. I think new technology, with new technologies we've discussed with AI and Web3, we're seeing new propositions and activations. I still think blockchain has huge potential. I'm not sure we've found its true use case yet. I think is it Boss have their XP program, which which is blockchain enabled, and I think it's actually really interesting. I'm not sure it's actually solving a problem that they really have, but I think what it does is it creates this kind of interesting alignment between new customers and existing customers. Tradable commodities. It's internationally transferable, but it also creates challenges around the incumbent loyalty commercials of breakage and non-redemption and the rest of it.
Yeah, agreed.
So, I think, we come back to the next 3 to 5 years. So 3 to 5 years, I think, we're going to be, what are we going to be really looking to? I think hopefully we'll see a return to growth in consumer spending. I think we'll have more considered spending. So I think people will look for quality over quantity, depth over breadth. Stuff that adds more, doesn't just add more to the pile of what they have, but actually betters it. And I think we'll have to find how brands support that, and their CX and their loyalty programs will do that. I think I'd like to think there's more sustainability angles in this as well. Ways to create closed loop businesses. I think businesses are going to have to invest in this. They're going to have to continue to demonstrate how they can move towards net zero. IKEA are looking at ways of allowing you to resell unwanted furniture. But I also think programs that give you the benefits of perhaps choosing delivery that reduces pollution could also be created. Why would I not choose to have my Tesco's delivery turn up at the same time as my neighbours? That would be a much more sensible way that you could reward both of us, again, to have the one trip rather than the delivery driver come back twice in the week. I think AI will continue to refine personalisation. I think building and fostering genuine connections using context, response, and even biometric data in a way that hasn't been previously possible. And I think to enable this, we will need to continue to see this kind of move towards sort of zero-party data relationships. We've talked a lot about first-party data, and businesses spend a lot of time saying, "Oh, I need to build my database." But zero-party is a much more explicit value creation where the data subjects not only actively give you control, so they actively give you control in the data relationship rather than just harvesting it. And there's also a need to use your data in an aggregated way within AI to better serve your specific needs. And I think people will start to see the value of AI is driven by the fact that actually it's using a lot of other people's data to help you get what you want from it. And I think I talked about working with Halfords, and I think Halfords can, what's interesting is that would you really, if I sat there and said, Rob, give me your data for, email address and details of Halfords, you go, oh no, I don't need to. I know what Halfords sell. I'll go and buy my wiper blades when I need those. Actually, what they do have is a huge database on every vehicle virtually on the road and the things that go wrong with them and knowing when they go wrong with them. So what are the likely indicators and predicators of it? Now, ask Rob, give me your details about your vehicle. Well, sure, I don't really have a problem with that because it doesn't feel quite so personal. And actually, you have to be genuinely helpful in keeping me moving and keeping me safe with my vehicle. So I think the way that we move towards the kind of the data value exchanges and the type of data we want becomes, as we mentioned right at the top of this conversation, really important.
Yeah, it's funny. I always talked about this kind of concept of like, I'm not sure these are the right words, but like customization versus personalization. In that context, almost the customer's trying to customize their own experience based on what they're telling you. And I think that's a really interesting context. And especially at the beginning of a relationship where you don't know anything about anybody yet. How can I create a segment or understand you at all? And I think zero party is an interesting way of doing that. I think the only question, and when we've talked about this in the past, is how do you get critical mass of that? And that ties into value exchange and all that kind of good stuff that we've talked about. But well, look, thank you for that, reading the tea leaves and looking into the future. We're going to wrap it up here, but I always like to give my guests a chance to have a bit of a safe space to vent. And years ago now, actually, we created the Everybody Hates Your Brand Marketing Room 101, where I allow people to suggest something that annoys them about marketing or business in general that you would like to see locked away for eternity. We've had some really interesting ones. And so this is your chance to get something off your chest. Tom, what would be the thing that if you could, you would put into the Everybody Hates Your Brand Room 101?
Oh, this is a good question. I remember the BBC programme. I want to convey about where you pull the lever up on it and it drops into the box. But it would be pretty easy to pick something as a marketing professional.
Go on then.
I guess the kind of the continuous pursuit of seemingly irrelevant vanity metrics around engagement that have no correlation to outcomes would be a particular bugbear. But
agreed.
I think actually there's a few things I experienced as a consumer that might be worthy of an entry, and I have a particularly visceral response to retailers who try to prompt you to buy something additional and normally random at the point of purchase. You know the thing. You're standing there, you're just about to pay for something, and someone says, "Would you like a packet of tissues or a chocolate bar?" It's not targeted, it's not contextual, it's not personalized, and it sort of really enhances the experience. And it sort of just feels like a desperate act to increase the basket size through opportunism and impulse that actually leads to buyer's remorse, damaging the brand and almost at every point. It obviously must create incremental revenue, as they wouldn't persist, but it feels like that's such a missed opportunity for a much more valuable interaction that a human, and you talked about being human, your human interaction could occur at that point that creates a positive experience, and that in the long term, again, we talk about loyalty and good experiences. That feels like that's just a missed opportunity, and I don't want the random thing that you're.
Agreed. And I think you think about the peak end rule that people remember an experience based on the sort of that peak of that experience, but also largely the end of that experience, and you're giving people a pretty crappy end of their experience. So no, that is accepted. That can go straight into Room 101. You'll be delighted to know that the idea of as proprietor of Room 101, I was allowed to put in my own, and one of them was the use of the word engagement without any kind of understanding of what those metrics are. So that's already safely tucked away.
Excellent. Good.
In Room 101. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and spending your time with us. It's been really, really interesting and enlightening episode. So thank you once again for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Rob.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Tom is an interesting man. Lots to say, lots of expertise to share. I hope you found it both entertaining and useful. We will be back soon with another interview. So until then, take great care and be vigilant out there.